Reading FC have been crowned Kings of Europe, and now they're looking to become the first English club to complete the quadruple. Can they do it? Let's find out. Welcome to Reviving the Royals Season 6. The 2029-30 season saw Reading win one of the greatest Champions League finals of all time. They also retained their Premier League title and lifted the Carabao Cup to secure a famous treble. With a new campaign on the horizon, Royals boss One Giant Pixel had his heart set on going one better and winning an unprecedented quadruple. So he decided to make a few changes to a squad that had already seen defensive midfielder Lewis Wing retire and goalkeeper Joel Pereira become a free agent after his contract expired. Fortunately, the gaffer had a rather sizable transfer kitty at his disposal. The first player through the door at the SCL Stadium was imposing Belgian goalkeeper Noah Mercier, who joined from Manchester United for almost £56 million. And One Giant Pixel pulled off a major coup by convincing French defensive midfielder Yann Courbet to swap Real Madrid for Reading in a deal worth just under £100 million. Attacking midfielder Alia Touré then joined on a free transfer, as did winger Abdelmajid Aboubakar. The boss subsequently decided to cut short central defender Peter Vermeulen's loan at Manchester United and brought him back into the fold. Defensive midfielder Jurgen Kohler, winger Billy Sutton, attacking midfielder Joshua Newton and striker Marek Mazurek also returned, having each spent 2 years out on loan. These arrivals meant that some players had to leave. Defensive midfielder Bradley Ibrahim was sold to Monza for £3 million, while Excelsior Rotterdam spent £5 million on winger Isaac Brusberg. Attacking midfielder Kieran Morgan went to West Ham United for £18.5 million, and centre-back Hayden Matthews was sold to Kaiserslautern for the same price. Last but not least, academy prospects Jack Faulkner, Nathan Brown and Lee Baxter were all promoted to the senior squad. They were sent on loan to Spezia, Almeria and Bodo Glimt respectively. After all of that, Reading's first 11 was looking incredibly strong as they prepared to take on Newcastle for the Community Shield at Wembley. The Toon Army had beaten the Royals in the previous season's FA Cup final, so One Giant Pixel's men were out for revenge. And after Eduardo Guardado had brought the best out of Mercier, they went straight up the other end and Julien Duranville pounced to put them ahead. Newcastle were level just after the hour mark when Nick Voltemada was given far too much time and space and he fired home. Both sides created chances after that, but it was Reading who emerged on top as a slick one-touch passing move ended with Kelvin Ehebachiman finding the net. Even the manager sprinted down the touchline to get involved in the celebrations after that one. Reading's players and fans were delighted at the final whistle and captain Michele Conti was once again on hand to lift the trophy. Just days later, the Royals had the chance to add another piece of silverware to their collection when they faced Europa League holders Roma for the UEFA Super Cup. Ehebachiman picked up where he had left off against Newcastle to put his side 1-0 up before Konstantinos Karetsas doubled their advantage on the stroke of half-time. Ehebachiman went on to complete his hat-trick with two well-taken finishes to seemingly wrap up a convincing win. But the Royals fell apart in the final 15 minutes, with Matthias Sule, Manu Kone and Petro Kostyuk all scoring as Roma threatened to mount an incredible comeback. In the end, however, Reading managed to hold on and add to their already bulging trophy cabinet. The campaign to defend their Premier League title began with a trip to West London to face Fulham at Craven Cottage. One Giant Pixel rested his stars after their Super Cup exploits, and this move immediately backfired, as Kevin found Eric Koizek and he put the hosts one up with a thumping finish. The Royals kept probing for an opening, and when Jacob Wright found Billy Sutton, the young winger bamboozled his marker before netting the equaliser. Then, just minutes before half-time, Sutton got onto the end of Joshua Newton's through ball and gave his side the lead. There were opportunities at either end after the break, but the visitors did just about enough to leave the capital with all 3 points. One Giant Pixel rewarded Billy Sutton with a place in the starting lineup as Reading took on Como at the SCL Stadium on match day 1 of the Champions League. And he repaid the manager's faith within quarter of an hour as he set up Ehebachiman for the game's opening goal. Soon afterwards, Nestori Irankunda was put through by Ehebachiman and he sprinted away from the chasing defenders before providing an emphatic finish. And it was 3-0 just before half-time as a corner found its way to Ehebachiman, whose shot was bundled into his own net by Julen Aguirrezabala. Jeremy Bale did pull a goal back for the visitors after the break, but this really was a comfortable win for the Royals in the end. Then, disaster. Right before Reading's Champions League clash with Real Madrid, it emerged that Pierce Charles had been a bit of a naughty boy. One Giant Pixel was ruthless, immediately deciding to terminate the goalkeeper's contract, and the club's board gave the boss their full support. After all of that, one might have forgiven the Royals players for starting slowly against Los Blancos at the Bernabeu, but they came storming out of the blocks and Carezza slid home the opener with fewer than 15 minutes on the clock. Reading were positively purring, and when Ethan Nwaneri found Ehibachiman, he turned away from his marker before slamming an unstoppable shot beyond the keeper. Kylian Mbappe dragged Real Madrid back into the contest before the break, but this late goal from Julian Duranville put pay to any hopes of a comeback. What a win this was for the visitors. At the season's halfway point, Reading were in second place in the Champions League table and looking pretty much certain to qualify automatically for the next round. And nobody could keep up with them in the Premier League. Just 19 games into the season, they already had one hand on the trophy. In the Carabao Cup, meanwhile, the Royals had defeated Liverpool, Burnley and Aston Villa to set up a two-legged semi-final against Manchester City. They had reason to celebrate off the pitch too, as One Giant Pixel was named Manager of the Year yet again. Reading went into the first leg of their Carabao Cup semi-final having decided to make no changes to their squad during the January transfer window. The Etihad was looking resplendent and the visitors served up a performance to match those pyrotechnics. Ehibachiman got the ball rolling early on as he gleefully accepted Nwaneri's pass and produced a fine turn and finish. But City hit back immediately as Claudio Echeverri hammered home the equaliser from Erling Haaland's pass. That was as good as it got for the hosts. With almost half an hour played, Carezza found Gonzalo Navas with a delightful pass and he set up Ehibachiman for his second goal of the game. And the visitors pulled away in the second half as Julian Duranville fired past Gianluigi Donnarumma before substitute Marek Mazurek made it 4-1. That win meant that One Giant Pixel could rest a few of his starters for the second leg of the SCL. Both sides hit the woodwork as they played out a relatively dull 0-0 draw to ensure that Reading reached the final where they would play Nottingham Forest. Back in the Champions League, the final match of the league phase saw the Royals welcome Turkish giants Galatasaray to the SCL Stadium. The hosts took a little while to get going, but then Ehibachiman burst through and held off a defender before finding the far corner. Mercier was called upon to save his side on a couple of occasions after half-time, but then Duranville found Andre Garcia marauding forward and the fullback produced an unstoppable finish to put the game to bed. The win meant that Reading finished the league phase in second place behind Marseille. In the next round, Carezza scored twice at the San Mamés as they overcame Athletic Bilbao 5-1 on aggregate, and they defeated Manchester City 2-1 on aggregate in the quarter-finals with Andre Garcia among the scorers. They would play Inter Milan in the semis. While all of this was going on, the Royals were also sweeping aside Plymouth Argyle, West Ham, Aston Villa and Tottenham in the FA Cup to set up a semi-final against Chelsea. Yet again, Reading were still in 4 competitions going into the business end of the season. Up next was the Carabao Cup final against Nottingham Forest on a quite beautiful evening at Wembley. Within 3 minutes, Ehibachiman got onto the end of a through ball from Carezza and beat Konstantinos Solakis from an unbelievably tight angle. Forest was shell-shocked and the striker doubled the Royals' lead not long afterwards before Ethan Nwaneri made it 3-0. Before the break, there was still time for Nwaneri to score his second goal of the game and for Amari Hutchinson to pull one back for Forest. Any hopes of a miraculous fight back were extinguished just after half-time as Ehibachiman completed his hat-trick. Weston McKennie did manage to get another one for Forest, but the Royals shut up shop after that and were soon celebrating what had turned out to be a bit of a thrashing. All that was left was for Captain Michele Conti to step forward and lift the cup before the players ran over to share their joy with the fans. The Royals had an opportunity to win another trophy when they faced Chelsea at Stamford Bridge just a few days later. They went into the game knowing that if they matched or bettered Arsenal's result against bottom club Swansea City, they would be Premier League champions again. And they got off to the perfect start as, you guessed it, Kelvin Ehibachiman turned his marker inside out before finishing with aplomb. He was at it again 10 minutes before half-time, expertly taking down Julian Duranville's lofted pass and finding the bottom corner. The hosts did create a few opportunities after the break, but either put them wide or found Royals goalkeeper Noah Mercier in fine form. At the final whistle, the Reading fans got the party started in the away end while the players gathered together on the pitch to celebrate the result of months of hard work. For some unknown reason, they had to wait until after their next league game to actually get their hands on the Premier League trophy. Lord knows what that was all about. Anyway, Reading was suddenly halfway to the quadruple and the big games just kept on coming. They had to play Chelsea again in the semi-final of the the FA Cup at a wet and windy Wembley. And with just 5 minutes on the clock, Duranville got onto the end of Corbet's pinpoint pass, and he was never going to miss that. With half-time approaching, Nwaneri then went on a run from within his own half. Chelsea's defenders were seemingly unwilling to close him down, so he just kept on going before eventually tucking a low finish into the net. The Royals' opponents were desperately poor going forward. Anytime they got anywhere near the goal, their feeble attempts were comfortably repelled. And so it was that Reading advanced to the final, where they would face Brighton and Hove Albion. But before that, it was time to turn their attention to the Champions League once again. There was a febrile atmosphere inside the SCL as the Royals welcomed Inter Milan for the first leg of their semi-final. And the fans went bonkers as straight from kick-off the ball was worked to Duranville and he made it 1-0. Reading fullback Gonzalo Navas then produced a quite sensational block at the other end before Duranville struck again on the stroke of half-time. And after Mercier pulled off this fine save, the Royals put together a flowing move that ended with Ehib Achuman firing home his side's third. Tie over? Not quite. The visitors gave themselves hope late on as Fran Benitez found the bottom corner and the striker almost got another shortly after that. But Mercier made the stop and the game ended 3-1. Ahead of the second leg at the San Siro, there was real belief among the Inter fans that they could come back and win this tie. But those hopes were soon dashed as Ethan Nwaneri skipped away from his marker and slammed a shot into the far corner. The Royals fans back at home enjoyed that one. The home side now needed 3 goals to take the tie to extra time, but on the rare occasion that they did threaten, Mercier was equal to everything that was thrown at him. This was an incredibly professional display from the visitors, and the final whistle confirmed their place in another Champions League final. This time around, they would be playing Bayer Leverkusen. Reading were now just 2 games away from realising their dream of becoming the first English club to win the quadruple. The first was the FA Cup final against Brighton at Wembley. The Royals had been defeated by Newcastle in the previous year's final, and they were determined to right that wrong. They started like a train. Brighton had not even touched the ball when Navas's lofted pass was headed across by Nwaneri, and Ehib Achuman was there to put his side ahead. Brighton refused to lie down and created a couple of half chances before Arda Güler's cross was headed home quite wonderfully by Jorginho Rutter 5 minutes before the break. Then after Folarin Balogun passed up this opportunity just moments after the interval, Reading went straight up the other end and Ehib Achuman restored their lead. Mercier produced a magnificent save to keep out this Rutter effort before Navas released Ehib Achuman, and a player of his calibre was never going to pass up that chance. The goal meant that the striker had scored a hat-trick in the finals of the FA Cup and Carabao Cup this season. Brighton could not respond as the Royals completed a domestic treble, much to the delight of the players as well as the fans watching inside the stadium and at home. And what a way to exercise the demons of that final against Newcastle. But there was no time to relax. They had to put their bodies through one last gruelling encounter if they were going to win the quadruple. Atletico Madrid's Estadio Metropolitano was the venue for this year's Champions League final. A wonderful stadium for a wonderful occasion. Only Oliver Glasner's Bayer Leverkusen stood between Reading and sporting immortality, and the German side seemed desperate to stop the Royals from making history early on as they poured forward, creating chances almost at will. On the half-hour mark, Lucas Bergvall won the ball from Michele Conti and set up Esteval for the opener. It was the very least they deserved. Leverkusen were not only excellent going forward, but they were also strong at the back, and Reading were really struggling to break them down. Then on the stroke of half-time, they created 2 chances out of nowhere, with goalkeeper Anatoly Trubin denying Karetsas and Joshua Bakker. After the second save and with the Leverkusen fans bouncing, Charlie Savage's corner was nodded on and Conti produced this outrageous overhead kick to equalise. We've got to look at that one again. Stunning, simply stunning. The second half was pretty much the same as the first, with Leverkusen creating chances and Reading being suffocated when they ventured forward. But this time the German side could not make their pressure count. And when the Royals broke forward with only a couple of minutes remaining, well, this happened. Cue utter bedlam in Spain and back in Berkshire. The final whistle sparked joyous scenes as the full magnitude of Reading's achievements sank in. For the first time ever, an English club had won the Champions League, Premier League, FA Cup and League Cup in the same season. And having scored that ridiculous bicycle kick to get his side back into a final they arguably deserved to lose, it was fitting that Michele Conti was the first to get his hands on old big ears. This was the final Premier League table, with the Royals breaking the 100-point barrier and and even going the whole season unbeaten. Kelvin Ehibachiman was once again Reading's top performer with 43 goals and 13 assists in 51 games, although his teammates also played their part over the course of the campaign. Of course, there had to be a bus parade so that Reading's fans could celebrate their football club's momentous achievement. And after 6 seasons, this seems to be the right time to bring this series of videos to an end. After all, under one giant pixel, the Royals had been well and truly revived. Thank you for watching, and if you have enjoyed this video, please feel free to leave a like or even subscribe to the channel. Goodbye for now.